This is function graphing paper, function table. So it's just like basically your the XY grid over here on the right, but the functions that we're going to be graphing are given in terms of f of x equals. Now, f of x is the same as y. So when you substitute in x values over here, you're going to get y values in the middle column, and then we're going to write ordered pairs in the third column. But because in chapter 8, you're going to be graphing things that we've never graphed before, the first time you graph something brand new for the very first time, we do tables. And then once you see a pattern, then you know, hey, this type of function is always going to look like this. Then we start looking for the little telltale pieces of how can I graph this graph without plugging in numbers? And that's what we're going to be working on. So anytime you graph something brand new for the very first time, we always start with a table. We plot points, and then we see the pattern. And from there, it becomes, all right, whenever we see this type of equation, like y equals mx plus b, that's always going to be a straight line. When you have x to the first and y to the first, always a straight line. Always. And then when we see something with an x squared, it's always going to look like something else, and so on and so on and so on. So I just sent this to you in an email, and I also put it up in the announcements. So if you haven't had a chance to print it off today, that's okay. But it would be a really good idea to maybe make a couple of, just a couple of copies of this next week. Okay. We're going to start with this warm-up, because this warm-up is an overlap between chapter 3 and chapter 8. This is basically, I'm going to use this as part of our lecture today, because we're going to be dealing with writing the equations of lines and graphing, linear equations in 8.1. So we're picking up right where we left off. And just like I told you, parallel and perpendicular are going to be a part of the very first thing that we do. Writing the equation of a line parallel, writing the equation of a line that's perpendicular. It's going to be on your first quiz. We're going to take a quiz on 8.1, not next week, but the week after. And you're going to have to do one of these two. And it's going to be on the chapter 8 and chapter 9 test. When I say chapter 8 and chapter 9, I mean the next test is going to be one test covering 8 and 9 together. And then through these 2 points, and then making sure you can graph something that looks like this. Okay, make sure I covered everything. Oh, last thing I want to cover is this. So when I'm done grading your test, I'm going to send out an email to you in Canvas. Now, and that's the reason why I send it in Canvas, is because that is the only way I can send an email to the whole class. That is the only access I have to send an email to everybody. So I'm going to send out this email in Canvas, probably on Saturday when everything is done. Now, if I have to respond to emails, are you done yet? And I have to take time to respond to something like that, I won't get a chance to finish. So you got to let me finish. And then if you haven't heard from me by Monday, then yeah, you might want to call the police and have send them to my house. I'll send out this email, the chapter 3 tests and your updated grades are ready. You may email me at my school email, the Outlook account, the Jim down here at the bottom, jim.esquivel@sacd.edu, that thing. Not through Canvas. And you know what? I put this, when the tests are always ready, every time we take a test, I put this out here every single time, not through Canvas. Guess what? People email me through Canvas. I'm not paranoid. I'm just frustrated. That's all. If you would like your overall grade and a PDF of your graded test. Well, this, what did I say? About the, find the, no decimals except for the one that's written in decimal for the slope. Whole bunch of people writing their answers in decimals on the slope. Okay. Where did it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? So this is the warm up I want to talk about right here. Okay. So your first quiz, and the first quiz is going to be on the 22nd, 8.1 quiz on the 22nd. And you're going to have to write the equation of either a line that's parallel or perpendicular to another line that goes through some given point. Just like this first one or this second question right here. So question number 1, we want parallel to 8x minus 12y equals 0, and it's going to go through 18 negative 8. And then number 2, we want perpendicular to the line 15x minus 12y. And this one goes through negative 20, negative 2. Okay. And again, this is not just a warm-up, but it is also part of your notes. Okay, because I'm going to show you one more thing. If you've looked at the homework, 8.1 only has 13 questions. So the first one's graphing. No, I don't want that one. Next one's graphing. Don't want that one. So this one, number 3, use function notation. So what I'm giving you right now is basically the notes to question number 3. Use function notation to write the equation of the line that has this given slope, a slope of 2, and you're given a y-intercept. But instead of writing y equals mx plus b, you're supposed to use function notation. And then question 4, use function notation. Okay. And then question 5, find the equation using function notation. And question number 6, using function notation. Question number 7, equation line passes through the 2 points using function notation. Okay, function notation, function notation, function notation. Through the point 5, negative 8, and it's perpendicular to 8y minus equal to x minus 16. Function notation. Okay.
Quick question.
So writing the equation of the line using function notation. So
Mr. Escobar?
Here we go. Step 1, you want to write the equation of a line, you need slope. Step 1, we want slope. So we're not given the slope, but we're told it's parallel to that line. Parallel lines have equal slopes, just like those two L's. If you turn the two L's sideways, you get parallel lines have equal slope. So if I want the slope of the parallel lines, and the two L's look like parallel lines themselves, that's the symbol for parallel, the slope of the parallel line. Well, you need this slope over here. To get the slope of this line, you solve for y, put it in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So to solve this for y, you subtract 8x minus 8x. So that leaves, don't forget the negative, negative 12y equal to negative 8x. And then divide each side by negative 12. This next step is crucial. Y equals a negative over a negative is a positive. Simplify. Right now you have positive 8 over 12x. So the slope is 8 over 12, and people actually use 8 over 12, and they make the problem so much more difficult because they don't reduce this to lowest terms. You need to reduce this to lowest terms. It's going to pay off. The common factor is a 4. This is 4 times 2 over 4 times 3x. So your 4's reduce, and you're left with y equal to 2/3 x. So there is our y equals mx plus b. Whenever you have y by itself, you have mx plus b on the other side. So what is the slope that we just found?
Two-thirds, or 2 over 3.
Hey, come on now. I only got 2 hours of sleep last night. I've only gotten 2 hours of sleep each night this week. If I'm up and doing this, I know you guys can answer back. What's the slope of the line we just found?
I think his mic's off.
Yeah, I think you can't hear us.
It's oh yeah, it is his mic. We should put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it. I figured it out because I haven't turned the mic on. I haven't fixed it out. No, my speakers. I'm getting the. All right, I got you. All right. Idiot. There you go. Thank you.
Hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you guys now. Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry about that. I was throwing a tantrum for nothing.
It's
What's
2
the
over
slope
3.
line of the sound?
2 over 3.
There you go, 2 over 3. And just for fun, what's the y-intercept over here on this one?
0. Or
Good. 0. Because the plus b, that's after the x, the b comes after the x. There's nothing there. There's no number. Plus what? Well, the only way you have a nothing is because the y-intercept is a 0, plus a 0. Remember that, because that's going to come up. Parallel lines are equal slopes. So since this line is going to be parallel to this one, the slope that I'm going to use is also 2/3. Step 1, when you write the equation of a line, you need slope. Because they want parallel, the slopes are equal. So you had to figure out this slope so we could use the same slope. One step at a time. So this is not a special case because it's not zero, it's not undefined. So it's not horizontal, it's not vertical. So we're going to write down y equals mx plus b. That's step 3. And then plug in the slope that we just found. We plug in the 2/3. Y equals 2/3 x. Now we just need to solve for b. That's the missing piece of the puzzle. To solve for b, we're going to plug in something for x and y. The only x and y that we have is this one right here. This is the only point on the line that we know of. So this is my x and y. So you're going to let x equal 18 and y equal -8. So -8 goes in here for y, equal to 2/3 times 18 plus b. And this is why you want to reduce this slope over here. Instead of using 8/12, look at this. If you use 8/12, you're not going to see how nicely this reduces. It's better that you're using 2/3. Because the smaller or the, you're going to have to use your simplified fraction in your final answer anyway. If you use 8/12 in your final answer, I'm going to put, you need to reduce your fraction. You're going to lose a point because of that. Always reduce to lowest terms. So why not reduce over here? So here we go. Let me see. Let's do 3 goes into 18 6 times. So -8 equals 2 times 6 is 12 plus b. You good?
Yes.
Subtract 12. Subtract 12 from both sides. -8 minus 12 is -20. That's the y-intercept. So the missing y-intercept right here, you're going to replace that with a -20. So y equals 2/3 x minus 20. Now this is where we stop in chapter 3. That's what you would have done on the chapter 3 test. In chapter 8, we want the final answer to be written using function notation. So instead of y equals mx plus b, we're going to want function notation. And what that means is instead of y equals mx plus b, what is y interchangeable with?
F of x.
F of x. All you have to do now that you have your y, is you replace the y with f of x. F of x equals mx plus b. This is your function notation. So in chapter 8, final answer is going to be f of x equals 2/3 x minus 20. That's the only change you make. Now, the worst thing about the homework, because it's online, you're typing your answers in, they already have this on your homework. They have this already waiting for you, and you're just filling in what the final answer is, the 2/3 x minus 20. You don't have to write out, you don't have to type out f of x equals. So when it comes time to actually do your test or quiz, you haven't actually written this out by hand unless you're working it out on paper when you do your homework. And then you take your quiz or you take your test, you got to make sure you write this down and follow directions. So if all you do is find y equals this and then type this in, but you never finish the problem yourself and write out f of x equals, you might not be prepared to do it pencil and paper. That's what I'm getting at. So make sure you, when you're writing it out, finish the whole thing. Force yourself to be disciplined about it. Any question about this first one?
No.
Okay. Parallel slopes are equal. I'm going to move the perpendicular one over here. So in 2 is perpendicular to 5x minus 12y equals, that was supposed to be a 0. (15x minus 12y equals 0) through -20, -2. Double checking. Yeah. So perpendicular, 2 syllables, perpendicular. 2 syllables means when you find the slope, your slope of your perpendicular, you got to do 2 things, opposite and reciprocal. The slope of the line that we want is the opposite and reciprocal of the slope of this line up here. So the slope that we want, we got to find this slope first. Subtract 15x. So that's -12y equal to -15x. And then divide both sides by -12. And there's positive y equal to, a negative over a negative is a positive. And I'm going to show you the whole thing. I got 15 over 12 x. Reduce that. Simplify it if you can. Common factor for 15 and 12 is a 3. This is 3 times 5 over 3 times 4 x. So over here, when you reduce the 3's, the slope is 5 over 4 x. Slope is positive 5 over 4. And again, real quick, what's the y-intercept right here?
Zero.
0. Now, the question I gave you on your test on Monday, when you had to do your test on Monday, I already gave you the line that you were parallel or perpendicular to. It was already in slope-intercept form. I gave you y equals 5 force x plus 3 or 5 force x minus 2 or whatever. I gave you parallel or perpendicular, and it was already in slope-intercept form. You did not have to do what I just did here. So, as I said last week on the Chapter 8 quiz and the Chapter 8 test, that's not going to be the case. You're going to have to figure out the slope first, and then you come back over here. So you're going to have to do what I'm showing you right here just to get the slope for what we want. Okay? That's why I'm using these as your examples. So if this slope is 5 over 4, what's my perpendicular slope?
Negative 4 over 5.
Perfect. Negative, because it's opposite, and then reciprocal, you flip it, 4 over 5. There's my slope. We are now completely done with this equation over here. We don't need it for anything else. We just need it to use its slope. It's kind of like that first girl that paid attention to me when I was a sophomore. All she needed from me was a date to the Christmas formal. And then once she got the date to the Christmas formal, she left me alone and left me over here to rot. See? It all, math relates to life. And it's not like I'm holding a grudge. Okay. Wow, not even a chuckle. I guess you must think I'm pathetic. I mean, everybody's like they're just going, wow, what a sad man. Okay. Y equals mx plus b. It's not a special case. No wonder he collects comic books. Okay. Y equals mx plus b. Plug in your slope. Negative 4 over 5 x. Hey, all we need now is b. Define b. Plug in the x and y. X is negative 20. Y is equal to negative 2. So negative 2 equals negative 4 over 5 times x, which is negative 20, and your plus b. So negative 2 equals negative times a negative is a positive. 5 goes into 20 4 times. So a negative 4 times a negative 4, positive 16 plus b plus b. And then we subtract 16 from both sides. And that's negative 18 equals our y-intercept. So we end up with y equals negative 4/5 x plus negative 18, so minus 18. And this would be the chapter 8 sorry, chapter 3 answer. If we were in chapter 3, but in chapter 8, we want function notation. So all you do is replace the y with f of x. Now, you got to make sure you read directions, because I can also say, write the equation or write the, find the function g of x for a perpendicular line to this line. So I might say in the directions, what is g of x equal to mx plus b? Or h of x. I could say f of x or g of x or h of x. So if I say g of x up here, when you write your final answer down here, I would just use g of x equals -4/5 x minus 18. So you got to make sure you read the directions specifically, because in the directions, it'll tell you what function to call it. Do I call it g, or do I call it an h, or do I call it an f, whatever it is. The directions will tell you. Okay? So you just got to make sure you read and follow the directions. On the homework, they just, because they already pre-write it into the homework problem, it's always f of x. But I want to point that out on your quizzes and your tests. It may say something else. So you used, if it says g of x in the directions and you put f over here, that's not what the direction said. You got to read the directions. Any question there?
No.
Okay. Number 3. Through the point -2, -1, and -5 or +5, -1. So this is next week's warm-up. So next week, you can see right here, it says write the equation over here, number 2, write the equation line described using function notation g of x equals mx plus b if possible. It goes through this point and perpendicular to this line right here. But it says using g of x equals mx plus b. Okay? So the directions will tell you. Let's do this one, and we want to write the answer using h of x equals mx plus b. That's what you want your final answer to be written with, h of x, if possible. All right. Step one, we want the slope. Well, they give us 2 points, so we can find the slope. Y sub 2 minus Y sub 1 over X sub 2 minus X sub 1. So, hey, those two Y's are both the same. So the first Y or the second Y, which one do you want me to start with?
Second.
So this -1 minus that one. So that's a negative, so parentheses, -1 over this 5 minus this X, which is a parentheses -2. And then 2 negatives make a positive. So this is -1 plus 1 over 5 plus 2. And this is where you want to make sure you get this right. -1 plus 1 is 0 over 7. 0 divided by 7 is what?
0.
Good. Make sure you know which one is which. 0 in the numerator is 0. 0 in the denominator is undefined. Which means if the slope is 0, this is a special case. This is either a horizontal or a vertical line. So we can't do y equals mx plus b and plug our stuff in. You need to know which one. Is this the horizontal or vertical line? Which one? You can't spell, go ahead.
Horizontal?
Yeah, you can't spell the word horizontal without an O, which is 0. The slope is 0. You can't spell the word horizontal without an O. There's my 0. Vertical, V. What letter does V come after?
U.
U.
And if the slope is equal to undefined, what letter comes after the U? Comes V. An undefined slope means you have a vertical line. So it's a horizontal line. If it's a horizontal line, H looks like almost like that H looks like an upside down Y. So it's Y equals a constant. Y is always the same number. And look, isn't Y the same number? So what does Y always equal on this horizontal line?
-1.
So again, if this were chapter 3, this would be it. Because you're using special case notation, Y or X equals. But we want chapter 8 function notation. And on this one, we wanted h of x equals mx plus b. Well, what replaces the y is function notation. So instead of y by itself, it's just going to be h of x equals -1. And there's my chapter 8 answer.
Why are we using an h of x instead of like?
The directions I put up here. I can ask you for any function name. I can ask you for f of x, g of x, h of x, q of x, w of x. They're just the names of the functions. Because it's quite often you have more than one function in a situation. So to distinguish between the different equations, to distinguish between the different sets of y values, you call them, this one is an f of x function, this is the g of x function, this is the h of x function. Okay. Any problem there? Okay. So the last one, we're graphing, which is basically like the first few questions on the homework, graphing. But you're given function notation instead of y equals. So this was f of x equals -1/3 x. So graph and label f of x equals -1/3 x. And remember, f of x is there just like a y is there. That is exactly the same as a y equal to -1/3 x. F of x function notation is interchangeable with y. Function notation, whether it be f of x, g of x, h of x, q of x, r of x, v of x, any function notation is interchangeable with a y. So when you see it written like this, you can switch it out and put y instead. It's exactly the same. So now you know you're looking at y equals, because y is by itself, on the right side, you have an m, x, and a plus a b. Because it's x to the first, this is a linear equation. That was a linear function, so this is going to be a straight line. So let's identify what's the slope of our line.
1/3.
Negative. And I like to put the negative in my numerator, -1/3. And then there's nothing here. So if there's nothing here, what y-intercept would represent that nothing?
0.
0. just like in chapter 3, all graphing this semester, no matter what chapter we're in, you're going to fit it in that grid that you have always worked with, -7 to +7 on the x-axis, y-axis, -7 to 7 on those little squares on the y-axis. There's no reason to count by 2s. There's no reason to count by 3s. You can count by 1s. Everything I ask you on a quiz or a test will nicely fit on those grids. Homework questions may not necessarily fit on the grids because they can ask whatever they want. But on the test and the quiz questions, just you count by 1s and it will all plot nicely. That's the purpose of having that grid, okay? Here, the y-intercept is 0. So on the y-axis, 0 is here at the origin. That's the first point you're going to plot, right here. That's the only point you don't have to label. The origin is the only one I don't need you to worry about labeling. Then the slope is -1/3. So the rise is -1, so you're going to go down 1, and the run is +3. So we go down 1, and then we go to the right 3. Down 1 and right 3. There's the next point on the graph. Every point maintains that same slope. You go down 1, right 3, down 1, right 3. Now, you could have written it as +1 over -3, which means you would have gone up 1 and left 3. And you would have ended up over here. It's all on the same line, so it's all good. I don't care what you do as long as you label it. This point, you have to label its coordinates, its ordered pair. What are the coordinates of that point?
3 and -1.
3, -1, good. If you labeled this one, that would be
-3 up 1. -3 1.
x is -3 and y is +1. I only need to see 2 points. I just need to see these two. Or maybe you have these two. Or maybe you have those two. I don't know. That's why everybody's test might be different. When I was filling out the answer key, I not only plotted these, but I went down 1 and over 3. So I plotted 6, -2, and I plotted -6, +2. I plotted every point that would fit on the grid just in case somebody plotted something different than me. And now you connect the dots. Make sure you put your arrows. Just like that. Any questions? Okay. Let's do our chat check. So going back here to the homework. You're graphing this equation. F of x equals 6x. So because that's f of x, that's the same as y equals 6x. So the slope of this line is what?
6/1.
6/1, and the y-intercept is?
Zero.
0. So when I go to graph this, I'm going to click on the line tool. The y-intercept is here at 0, so the origin. And the slope is 6/1. So I would go up 6 and right 1. Just like that. And check my answer.
Quick question.
Yes.
Do we all have like the same homework? Because
You
my
all have the
numbers,
same homework, but different questions.
okay, just because when you're going over that homework, my numbers are different.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So this is the new and improved way of copying somebody else's homework, when you would have a book and everybody would have the same questions because you're just doing problems out of a book. So, right before class, can I copy your homework? Because they're all the same questions. Now, when you have different problems, they're basically the same question, but somebody might have 5x, somebody else might have a 3x, somebody else might have a 2x, somebody might have a 6x. So if I click on similar question, somebody might have a negative 2x. So the slope here is -2 and the y-intercept is 0. So the slope being -2, I need a fraction because I want, rise over run. So I would make my slope -2 over +1. So when I go to graph this, the y-intercept is here at 0. Then I'm going to go down 2 and then right 1. So everybody has a similar question for number 1, just a different problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now I can always access your exact homework and do your exact question if ever that's the case.
Okay.
This better be a doozy. This better be an easy, freebie. I mean, listen. I mean, here's one of the problems with math. Word problems. As soon as somebody sees, oh my God, there's I have to read a paragraph. That means it's a word problem. That means I'm skipping this one. As soon as somebody sees word problem, I'm out. Or even like in this case, it's just a sentence. Oops. No. There we go. I clicked on the wrong one. I almost canceled the whole thing. Use function notation to write the equation of the line with the given slope, and y-intercept. So they're telling you what the slope m, remember that's m, and they're telling you the y-intercept, and they're telling you what b is. So instead of slope 2, you could put m equals 2. Y-intercept, this is b, 0, 5/6. So b is equal to 5/6. So basically, slope 2 So as soon as somebody sees this and they go, oh my God, there's not only, a word problem, but there's a fraction involved. Translate. Slope 2, m equals 2. Y-intercept, that means b equals, that's the y coordinate, 5/6. And you basically are supposed to fill in f of x equals mx plus b. Well, they just told you that m was 2. So 2x plus, and they just told you that b was 5/6. You're done. They just handed it to you. But as soon as people see, oh, how do I? It's like translate. Terminology, language. Don't panic. Breathe. Read the question. You got this. So 2x and then plus, whoops, that's equals, plus transfer opportunity. I'm in. Transfer. 5/6. That's all there is to it. And then function notation on number 4, equation line with a given slope and again, y-intercept. The y-intercept is 0, 0. So this means m is 2/3 and b is 0. Well, first of all, it's multiple choice. Which ones, when you have multiple choice, try process of elimination. They want function notation. Process of elimination. Which of these choices can you eliminate because they're not in function notation?
A and C.
A and C. A, I don't see any f of x. C, I don't see an f of x. So those are not function notation. Now, B has a function notation and D has a function notation. So the slope is 2/3 and the y-intercept is 0. So it would be 2/3 times x. Oh, right there, there's 2/3 times x because that's slope. And then somehow over here, they have a negative 2/3. I don't even know where a negative 2/3 would come into play. So again, process of elimination. If this is slope, it's m times x. So you would have slope m times x, b. Let's do this one. So number 6 that I'm doing is just like number 5 that I'm skipping. But number 6 has a fraction in it. The slope is 5/6, and it goes to the point -6,6.
You good girl today, or are you gonna get in trouble?
And we want function notation. We want f of x equals mx plus b. So I don't put f of x in until after I do the y stuff. I always do y equals mx plus b, and then at the end, I replace y with f of x. Step 1, find the slope. There it is. I found the slope. Is it a special case? Nope. So y equals mx plus b. Whoever's child that child is going to have to do the test if they're going to stay and listen, which would be a good thing. I don't mind that. I like doing that. The child runs for the hills.
Mom,
There you
Mom,
y equals, plug it in, 5 over 6.
what was that? When I was doing Mimi. What was that? In the room.
I went to work.
Okay. And now to figure out b, plug in x and y. X is negative 6. And y equal positive 6. So 6
You were dying and you
equals
were
5 over
Touch, go sit down. Go.
times
Go,
negative
baby,
6
please.
plus b. Your son or daughter is going to have to have to give me a, going to have to sign a release to have their voice be posted on YouTube. Okay. 6 equals positive times a negative, negative. 6 goes into 6 evenly. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5 plus b. B. Add 5. 6 plus 5, 11 equals b. So this b is an 11. So y equals 5 over 6x plus 11. Now that you got y equals, you're just going to replace this with f of x equals 5 over 6x plus 11. What is the function notation for a line with a slope of 5 over 6 that goes through the point negative 6, 6? Function notation is right there. So exactly what we've already been doing. So 5 over 6. And then you need your x, and then a plus 11. This is just like the one we did in the warm-up through 2 points. Another one with 2 points. No worries, Abby. On number 9, what kind of line is it if the slope is 0?
Horizontal.
Horizontal line, perfect. If it's horizontal, it's y by itself. If it's y by itself, y is going to equal negative 4. It's going to be this negative 4. So if y equals negative 4, then you just go f of x equals negative 4. Because it's a horizontal line. Slope is 0. Here they just use the word horizontal. So if it's horizontal, the slope is 0. If it's a horizontal, it's a special case. It's y by itself. So y equals the same number all the time. So what does y have to be? Y is always negative 4. Wow, same problem basically. Negative 4. And then here's just like the warm-up. Through this point and perpendicular to this line. And the other one is through this point, but parallel to this line. So one parallel and one perpendicular, just like the warm-up. And then the last question is back to the freebie. Here's your given slope, -4/7. So m is -4/7. And then the y-intercept is 9. So everything is handed to you on this one. So there's 8.1. And that's all your quiz is going to be on. Your quiz on the 22nd is just going to be on 8.1. Okay. And on Monday or Wednesday next week, we're going to do this warm up. You're going to have to do one graphing question where you're given the function notation to do the graph, and then one parallel or perpendicular to this equation or a equation. And you got to write it using function notation. So we'll do this warm up next Wednesday. All right. 8.2. Okay. Again, 8.2 kind of picks up a little bit where we left off in chapter 3. Use the graph of the given function to find the values of what does f of 2 equal. So remember, function notation is a y. So they want the value of f of 2. So remember, when you do function notation, you're getting ordered pairs. The 2 is the what? What goes into the function? It's ordered pairs. The 2 is the what?
The x.
It's the x. So when they're asking you, what does f of 2 equal by looking at the graph, they want to know what is the corresponding y value. So all you're doing is looking at the graph and you're trying to figure out what's the y value in the picture where x is a 2. So in that picture, I'm just going to kind of sketch it up here on the board real quick. It does this. The y-intercept is at -1. I'll show you in a minute. It's at -1. And it also says, it goes through. And it's very specific because they show, again, I'll bring it back up in a second. So right here, here's the picture for number 1 on 8.2's homework. So real quick. So value, what does f of 2 equal? Fill in the blank. So when I pull up and enlarge the picture, So f of 2, here's where x is a 2. So when x is 2, they specifically put a circle up there, a nice little closed dot. So there's where x is 2. What's the y value up here that corresponds to it?
5.
It's a
Five.
5. So if you were to write the ordered pair up here, when x is 2, this y is a 5. That's all you're doing. Find the ordered pair in the picture and then fill in the blank. When you plug 2 into that picture, the y value that comes out is 5. And that's all you're filling in. So here, looking at this picture, the value for f of 3. So we look at the picture. Right here on the x-axis, here's where 3 is. So down here on the graph, there's our dot. What's the y value down here when you plug in 3?
-5.
Negative 5. So that ordered pair would be positive 3, negative 5. So this one's a negative 5. So this time, use the graph of the given function to find x. So the last two, question 2, you had to find the value of the y value, f of 3 equals. Question 1, you had to find the value of f of 2. This time, they're telling you what y is. When f of x equals 2, what does x equal? What would we have to plug in for x that would make the y equal 2? So when we're up here, what is the x down here that corresponds to the y that's a 2?
-1.
Negative 1. The ordered pair is -1, positive 2. So when y is positive 2, in the picture, x is -1. And there were questions like this in the last chapter. And then this one causes nothing but tears. This question, I get what, how, who, because you know what? Look, you got two pictures. And then you got a whole paragraph going on over here. And then you got a question down here. And so it's like, oh my gosh. First of all, breathe. Use the graphs if necessary. Use the graphs if necessary. Of the functions to the right, if f of -1 equals -10, so if you plug in -1, you get -10. Write the corresponding, oh, that's all we're doing? Write the corresponding ordered pair. So here's what they're saying. They're telling you f of -1 equals -10. All they want you to do is to write that as an ordered pair. What's the x?
-1.
Negative, what did we plug in? We plugged in -1. And what's the y that came out? -10. That's all. You don't even need the graph. And then here's the second part. Even if I could, so first of all, there's two graphs here. In blue, right there, you can see in blue, this is where it says f of x. And the one in red is g of x. It says right here, it's kind of hard to see right there, but right here is g of x. So how do you know which one is which? Well, from left to right, that's f of x, this is g of x. And then you're supposed to figure out, if necessary, f of -1. So when x is -1, what's the y value down here? Well, you could barely see it. Plus, they don't put one of these dots. So maybe it is negative. I can't really tell for sure because it's not definitive. You can only be certain if you have one of these dots there, one of those points. But how do I know for sure? Because if they tell me this right here, if f of -1 equals -10, then the ordered pair is -1 for x and -10 for y. And then we do the same thing, use the graphs, if necessary, of the functions to the right. If g of 5 is 35, write the corresponding ordered pair. So now we're doing the g function, but we just want the ordered pair for g of 5 equals 35. I mean, on this one right here, g of 5 is 35. Over here, when x is 5, this picture only goes up to 10. You couldn't even use the graph if you wanted to because you can't see where g of 5 looks like. It's way up there. G of 5 is 35, it's not even in the picture. So you're not supposed to use the graph. You're supposed to recognize the ordered pair. What's the x? Hello?
5,
There you go. And what's the y?
35.
35. Easy as pie. And then just when you thought it was over, now we are going to use the picture. Because they're not giving you exactly what they told you in the last two questions. Use the graphs, if necessary, of the functions to the right, find f of 0. Well, they're only talking about the f function. So the f function, left to right, f and then g. So the blue function, f of 0. So when x is 0, so that's here on the y-axis, what's the y value?
5.
5. When x is 0, the y is a 5. F of 0 is a 5. And again, people panic because there's two different pictures and there's a paragraph to read. Here, find g of -4. So blue from left to right, that's f. Over here, they want g. So on the g function, when we plug -4, so there's -1, -2, -3, here's -4. So when -4 goes into the g function, what's the y value?
0.
Perfect. The y value here on the x-axis is a 0. Look at that. So far, look at this. We've done, in a matter of about 8 minutes, we've done 7 questions. Now they're going to flip it on you. They want you to find all values of x such that f of x equals -3. So I'm going to draw this one. So here's the picture. Okay. So to draw this, I'm going to pull this over here. So they're only talking about the f function. You see this shape right here? This is called a parabola. This is one of the shapes we're going to learn how to graph. This is why we want that function graphing paper, because in order to graph this, something that looks like this for the very first time, we start by basically plugging in numbers, plotting points, and then we see a pattern. And then we realize, hey, this kind of an equation is always going to look like this. And then if you tweak this thing, it does this to it. And if you tweak this, it's always going to do this to it. And when you do something like this, it's going to do this to it. So if I just look for these pieces, I know exactly where the graph goes and what it's going to look like. And I don't have to plug in numbers anymore. But this is one of the shapes we are going to learn how to graph. Okay. We want, it says, find the x values, and it's in parentheses, so maybe there's more than one, where f of x equals -3. So where f of x equals -3. And again, we're just basically, or I said basically too many times. That -3, is that the x or the y?
Y.
The Y.
The y. And think about the direction it said, find the x values. So if it says find the x values, that must be the y. So on the y-axis, here's -3. In this picture, how many times does this picture have a y value of -3?
Twice.
Twice. There are two places where you have a y value that's a -3. There are 2 points in this parabola where you have a y value that's a -3. So all you got to do is figure out the x that goes with it. So this is 1, 2, 3, this is 4. So 1 to the left, what's this x value right here?
3.
That's a +3. And then 1 to the right, what's this x value right here?
5.
5. So find the x values where y is -3. You're just listing them. One of them, or the first one from left to right, you have a 3, comma, and then you have a 5. Now here's the deal. You want to find the values of x. So these are two individual x's. Do not put the 3 and the 5 in a parentheses, because if you put them in parentheses, now you're saying this is an ordered pair, x and a y, not two x's. Or you're saying it's an interval, everything between 3 and 5, all the numbers in between 3 and 5. And that's not true. It's just two individual single numbers, 1, 3, and then a single 5. So you're just listing the two answers. Okay? So you got to be careful how you write it. Any questions there? Just like that. Okay. We're going to need to know, in order to graph the square root functions, simple square roots. Nice and simple square roots. What is the square root of 81? What times itself is 81?
9.
9.
That's all. All right, now this one. Fractions. You don't have to worry about this on your, dealing with this on a quiz or a test on this chapter, but it will come up later on. That's why I put it here. negative, and then a square root. You got a 49 over a 169. So the negative is on the outside of the square root. So that just means the negative of this answer. So that means my answer is going to be negative. Negative of this. The question is, what times itself? Gives me 49 over 169. So I have a fraction. What fraction times itself, numerator times numerator, is going to give me 49?
7.
7 times 7. The denominator is 169. What times itself is 169? 13. 13 times 13 is 169. You want to burn that into your memory. 169 is 13 times 13. So the square root of 49 over 169 is asking what times itself is 49 over 169? 7/13 times 7/13. So the answer is going to be the negatives on the outside. So it's going to be a negative 7/13. So over here, back to the screen share. Get a negative 7 over 13. What's the square root of 16?
4.
4. Right on. What's the square root of 9?
3.
3. And then every question we've done so far, they've all been multiple choice. A, the answer is 9, or the square root is not a real number. A, the square root is negative 7/3, or not a real number. Square root equal 4, or we could have said not a real number. Equal 3, or not a real number. And then right here, number 13. Now, we started with the square root of positive 81, and we got 9. Now, in number 13, they're asking what is the square root of negative 81? Well, 81 is 9 times 9. That is absolutely true. But positive 9 times positive 9 is not negative 81. If you go negative 9 times negative 9, that's not negative 81, that's a positive 81. The only way you're going to get a negative is if you have a positive times a negative. That makes a negative. But a square root means the same number times exactly itself. Positive 9 and negative 9 are not the same number. It's impossible to find two real numbers that will make a negative number when you multiply it times itself. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. This is not a real number. because you can't take the square root of a negative number. There is no real number that exists that will equal a negative when you square it. And this is a preview of chapter 10, which is in a month. So it's just not a real number. And then right here, this is where we're going to start learning how to graph x squared plus 2. But we don't automatically graph x squared plus 2. We start by just learning how to graph simple, plain old, single. What does the graph of x squared look like? And then absolute value of an x, -3 times an x squared. Now this one you should be able to do because that's x to the first. This is a linear equation, a linear function, because that's x to the first. So this is y equals mx plus b. So which of the two multiple choice answers can you eliminate? You can eliminate 2 of them.
A and D.
A and D, because A is not a straight line and B and D is not a straight line. The only 2 possible answers are either B or C because those are 2 straight lines. What's the slope of this one right here?
5/5.
And it's +5. +5. So look at the 2 possible, and you only have B and C left. One of these is a positive slope, one of these is a negative slope. So only one of these, and you don't even see, we don't even have to graph it. You just got to pick the right answer. Which of these is the only possible answer?
C.
C. C is the only one because that's a positive slope. Remember, a positive slope, +5, is a line that rises. A line that rises. B, that line falls. So over here with C, the Y-intercept is right there at -3. You can barely see the -3. And then it goes up 5, and you can barely even see the up 5 and over 1. But that doesn't even matter because it's blatantly obvious that's a negative slope on B. This is a positive slope on C. The question is a positive slope, so the only possible choice is C. And then we're going to learn how to graph square root. Now look at these crazy things. Okay. -2 times an absolute value of an x. And then the square root of an x minus 3. Okay. So what you need to do is finish and do 8.1. And basically, I would like you to be able to get all the way up to, on 8.2, you should be able to do 1 through 13.